All right. Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to part two of building out one of these Tailwind UI page examples. If you were tuned in to the stream earlier this week, we had to cut it short due to some audio issues that YouTube seemed to be having. So hopefully today is a little more stable. What we're doing today, if you didn't catch that first part, is we're building out an e-commerce package for Tailwind UI. And we're going to focus specifically on a particular page example today. If you want to check out the upcoming e-commerce package, you can get notified when it's ready because we're currently building everything out. So I just pasted the link in the chat there if you want to check that out for more information on everything that this package will contain. Specifically today, I'm going to open up Figma here. And we're building out this particular page example. So we started on this earlier this week, but had to cut it short, as I mentioned. And so we pretty much got to this top hero section and got the top navigation and footer stubbed out and the overall kind of page layout. So today we're basically going to finish out this hero section, this expandable menu for the different categories you can view, and the product grid itself, and hopefully get through all that pretty quickly. So today's going to be pretty much all styling. We got all of our markup done. All of our data is in place, being bound to the template. So that's really nice. So today's going to be fun, just lots of CSS. So let's dive right in. So as I mentioned, we kind of stopped last time building out this hero section with the background image and the main page title. And if we look at our live browser preview, you can see we just have a placeholder image in here for now. So let's go ahead and take care of some of this. One thing I noticed after stopping last stream was that our flyout menus, since this image is absolutely positioned, are showing up beneath it. So let's just make a quick z-index change to make sure that those appear on top real quick. And I'm going to change the approach that we use for this background image, but this is a good kind of protective measure in case other content is on this page. So even though we'll probably change this layout, which may not make this necessary, let's just make sure that it appears on top. So I'm going to scroll up to our popover, which is our internal component for handling these flyout menus. And basically, if you are familiar with Headless UI, I only paste the link to this. This is our open source resource for interactive components that are accessible for a lot of common patterns. So the popover is one of those components. And in our code base, we have our own little templating language here just for internal use, but then the output is HTML, React, and Vue. So our popover here is where those flyout menus are being driven from. And specifically, yeah, here's the panel. So this is the actual menu itself. It's absolutely positioned, so I just want to make sure that it has a higher z-index to it to make sure that it appears on top. So let me go back to my preview here. Yep, and that should help as a hedge against other absolutely positioned content that appears further down in the DOM. As I mentioned, though, I'm probably going to rework how we're handling this image real quick, just in anticipation of the other text and things we need to include. So let's see here. Scrolling back down to our hero. Yeah, last time we were including an image tag in the markup, but because this image is decorative, we won't have any alt text because we don't want assistive technology to come across it. It's not really adding any important information in this case. So instead of this, what I might do instead is just apply it as a background image to the parent container because it'll have the same effect, but it will be a little bit more resilient here. So I'm just going to do an inline style here to get the background image going. So we have our URL function, drop that in, and then I think I want to add a couple classes here. So we want BG center and BG cover to make sure that this image is always centered and scales proportionally with the container. So if we look, there shouldn't be much of a change. We do see our text showing up here, which we can start styling now. And let's take a look at our mockup real quick. So we basically have this text container with a blurred background, which will be fun because we can use a backdrop filter for that. And it looks like it's our gray 900 with an opacity. So let's get that in place. Real quick, let's style up the typography. So it's text 2XL, extra bold, and usually we use tracking tight anytime we're using extra bold. And then it looks like it bumps up to 3XL at our medium breakpoint and above. Okay. So let's keep all that in our head real quick. We have class text 2XL, font extra bold, tracking tight, and this is text white. And then at medium breakpoint, let's go up to text 3XL. All right, let's see if we pulled that off. Yep, that appears as expected. Let's style that paragraph text beneath it real quick, and then we'll handle this little text container. So text SM and cool gray 2. That's easy. Okay, cool. So SM and text gray 200. Looking good. Yep, that appears. Okay, let's work on that container. So we have 24 pixels of padding, so that would be 6 in our spacing scale all around. And then we have that gray 900 with an opacity and a backdrop blur. So let's get that in place as well. So we have class, let's say BG gray 900 and BG opacity. I'm going to say 75 just to stick with common values in Tailwind UI. We try to restrain ourselves from the full availability of utility classes in Tailwind CSS to try and make things a little bit more pattern driven in Tailwind UI. But you could go opacity 70. If you're using just-in-time mode, you can even do an arbitrary value if needed. But we try to stick with just a few stops for these common utility classes for Tailwind UI. We also have a backdrop filter, and we're going to use backdrop blur. And this should be the MD because it's 12 pixel blur. So question, what is the difference between the Headless UI popover and the list box component? Both seem to be similar. So the popover component is for displaying kind of arbitrary content. So in our use case here, it's for a flyout menu for navigational purposes, but this could include images, it could include just text information. So it doesn't really have an opinion on what's being shown. And it's pretty particular to these types of use cases. Also, the tab navigation pattern is a little bit different. So let's see, pop over here, we have a trigger button in our example, but you can tell it's more like navigational content, similar to how we're using it in our global UI. And with the tab pattern, we basically cycle focus back to the trigger so that you can close it and move on again. A list box is really a custom select menu, so it should be taking the place of a native form element. Whenever possible, it's best to use native form inputs for accessibility and to ensure that all the keyboard navigation is in place. But sometimes with form inputs, you want to have some customizations to the display of it, to the data, the interaction, those types of things. So this is basically, you can think of it as analogous to a custom select in HTML. So here we're showing checkboxes and custom styles, and so that's where list box comes into play. All right, I'm a UX designer and I look at the Tailwind Figma kit almost every day. Oh, thanks so much for the compliments. I appreciate it. Yeah, the Figma kit is quite a beast, but it's a fun project. Lots to maintain, but it's pretty rewarding as well. I'm glad you're finding use from that. Looks like our paragraph, we just need margin top on that, and then let's check in on our styling so far. I'm guessing, yeah, it's gonna be hard to see with this dark placeholder image, so we can change that up. We're gonna need some padding on the parent here. So that was P6 all around, which we'll check. Yep, that's looking good. And then in Firefox, they don't have backdrop filter support. I might open up Edge real quick, just so you can get a sense of this. It might be hard to see over the stream, but you can see that the background is a little bit blurred here. And so that's the effect that we want going for us. So yeah, Firefox doesn't support backdrop filters. They look pretty good in Chromium-based browsers, but Safari, because they kind of pioneered these filters, they implemented them, I think, behind a vendor prefix before anybody else. They look really good in Safari, so that's kind of the best presentation, but it has nice progressive enhancement. It'll fall back to a sensible, normal background color if needed. Okay, last thing, we want to push it to the bottom of this container and make it full width, and then we might have some padding changes at different breakpoints. So we might be able to use margin top auto on this. If not, maybe a flex on the parent would be the best way to align it. Yeah, let's maybe do flex on the parent here. And then worst case, you could always tie it to the bottom with relative and bottom 0, I think, too. Let's try it with the parent real quick, since there's only one child of this. So let's say flex. This would be in the call direction, and then it would be items end, I believe. Will that do it for us? Nope, that'll be in the other direction, so it's justify end because we're in a column orientation. That looks good. Okay, cool. Let's go with that. That seems like a pretty nice approach. And then it's full width, which looks good. So let's see if we have any responsive changes in terms of padding that we want to make across these different breakpoints. So 24 all around, 24 all around. That all looks the same. I think we keep it consistent across the board. Yeah, because it'll be constrained to part of the layout. Oh, okay, it looks like maybe at the... Oh yeah, I caught a couple. Okay, cool. So at LG, we want 32 all around, and then XL will increase the horizontal padding a little bit as well. So let's get that in place, and we should be done with this initial pass here. So LG, we had padding 8. And then at XL, we just want to change the padding X to 10, which is the equivalent of 40 pixels. Cool, so that's looking correct. Now this overall layout we'll handle in just a minute. I want to get through the styling of some of these other content regions first, and then we can handle the grid layout for the larger breakpoints. But I think that hero section is more or less done, so we can dive into this menu component, which is going to be pretty fun. Here is a good use case for the disclosure pattern, which a lot of times is also called an accordion. So you can also find this in Headless UI if you want to implement it directly in React or Vue. And the disclosure pattern is basically that expandable, collapsible section. It's a toggle. There's a lot of different names for it. In native HTML, it's the details and summary elements, which is really cool because we're starting to get native HTML elements with this functionality in place. There are some limitations to it, so we provide the disclosure as an opportunity to make an accessible custom implementation of what an accordion or a detailed summary would look like. So for this, we have our menu. Last time I put it inside of a side tag, which is already within our main. I think I'm just going to leave this as a raw nav within the main tag, because asides you typically find outside of the main landmark as complementary information. So this feels a little bit better. If we look at our design, we'll basically just treat this as a nav until we get to our large breakpoint, and then it'll still be a nav, but I'll probably then break it out to be an aside outside of the main section. So we'll get to that in a second. So we will have to duplicate a little bit of code that we show and hide responsively, which I try to avoid, but in this case, it's the best semantic structure, so it's worth it. All right, so let's see here. We have our disclosure as the parent. So we have X disclosure. Again, this is kind of just an alias internally that we have for basically compiling out to React and Vue. But this correlates exactly to the Headless UI component that you'll find on that website. So we have our menu as the kind of shell around this. And then we also have the button that we want to use to toggle this. So we'll create that. And then lastly, we'll have our disclosure panel. So let's make sure we have all of that in place. And I think the panel will take place of the nav because we have an as prop on here. So we can say as nav, we can get rid of this. I want to keep this ARIA label, so that way we can differentiate between the different landmark regions. So we'll get rid of our nav, because that becomes the disclosure panel in terms of the outputted markup. And let's see what else we need. We need to put something in this button just to test it real quick. So this will just say menu, I believe. And if everything's correct, yeah, we can see the basic functionality here. So everything's unstyled, it's unopinionated, but we have that accessibility that we're looking for. So right now I'm using the keyboard, and we'll have to implement some custom focus styles there, but it does work as expected. So let's get that styled now. All right, first thing first, we can style up our typography. We'll need this icon, and then we have this bottom border, which when you open the menu, what happens to that? Okay, so this will be a little interesting. We have a bottom border here, which I'd probably want to put beneath the, well, I could possibly include it as part of the trigger then, because it looks like the layout stays consistent. Okay, so that bottom border will be part of the menu disclosure button, and then we'll have our contents inside the panel there. All right, so styling the typography, text SM, medium, and gray 900. I'm going to put this inside of a span because I know that we'll have an icon next to this. So let's target this text specifically. Font medium and text gray 9. Looking good. And then we want that heroicon as well. So let's see here. So we have X heroicon. The type is solid, and the name of this is going to be our chevron down. Let's put some classes on this, and it's a self-closing tag. So I think this is 20 by 20, should be our standard size there. Yep. So we have H5, width 5, and then I think it's text gray 400 usually. Let me double check. Yeah, okay, cool. So now we have our icon there. Obviously this needs to be in a flex layout, and we want this to go full width as well. So let's start styling up this parent here. So we have full width. Let's see here. We're gonna have flex, justify between to push them to the outer edges of that button, and then align them to the center. Let's grab our preview. That's looking good. We obviously need to have some sort of layout constraint on this. And since this is only for smaller breakpoints, let me actually open Inspector Tools and pop open the responsive design mode. I'm going to fold this down here real quick. I'll make that font size much bigger if we need to look at the markup. Okay, cool. So one thing is that we're going to have a focus indicator on this when you tab onto it with the keyboard. So we want the focus indicator to have a little bit of spacing around the text and the icon, but visually we want the left and right edges of this content to align perfectly with the surrounding layout. So we're gonna have to modify the padding for this section in particular. So what I'd like to do then is, let's think about the best way of doing this. I think on our disclosure, we can add px2, which is only half the padding we typically need there. But I think I'm gonna do a little bit of padding around the button itself to make up for that. So on this, we could have padding 2 all around for the focus indicator. And I think this needs rounded MD because it's kind of like a button. Let's make sure we have background on that. I think it's BG gray 50 to match our page background. And then on hover, let's darken that to BG gray 100. Let's just see what we have so far. Looks like our hover styles, are they coming through? Let me give this a refresh real quick. All right, maybe I broke. Nope, looks like our server is still going. Might just be really subtle on my end. Let me just do something a little bit darker to check. It looks like those hover styles aren't coming through for some reason. So let's see what's going on. I can zoom this up a little bit here. So we have our button, and did I put the hover class in the wrong spot? No, yeah, I put it on the text. That's why. Okay, let's put it on the outer piece there. And let's see here. Cool. Okay, so now we have a background color that's appearing. Let's put it on 100. Let's say focus outline none. And anytime you hide the default outline, you need to provide a custom one. So we'll say ring 2. Ring basically is a custom box shadow utility that we use a lot for focus indicators that can match border radius and get the styling that we're looking for. And I think we'll say ring indigo 500. I think that'll be good. Okay, so it's kind of subtle, but there is a background on hover, and then we obviously need to add some spacing to the section. So now that we have that padding in place, let's figure out the desired layout of this actual piece of UI here. So we have empty 10 at the top for margin top of 40 pixels, and then 24 padding on the bottom for this bottom border. We're going to have the focus ring and some of that padding, so we'll take away 8 pixels from the top and bottom. So up top, instead of 40, we just have 32. So there's a lot of considerations with things like this where you want to have the same visual layout, but you want to add a little bit more functional tap targets and focus indicators. So you have to kind of adjust some of your typical rules there. So we could add empty 10 and go with the full padding and then tuck this up with negative margin 2. So that's one approach. So we should have the desired spacing, but when we engage our focus indicator, you can see that it takes up more space there. And then let's see here. Beneath that, we'll have our product grid, which has 48 pixels on top, but 24 by default. Okay, so we might want to provide some extra padding within the panel when it's expanded, but default looks like 24 there, and I think we can go with that. So we'll have this section that we haven't quite started yet for products. I'm just going to push it away so we can get a better idea of what we're working with here. Kind of move everything away so we can evaluate this. Okay, cool. So our toggle is looking good. I think the only thing is on open, we want to flip this around. So let's see. I think we have some things in the disclosure component we can use for that. So we have our Heroicon here, and we have a couple helpers with these components. So we have open and closed classes that we can basically toggle. So the XOpen class, we're going to rotate this 180, and I think I need to add a transform for that. Let's see. Let's add transform here. So we're going to rotate that 180, and then when it's not open, we're going to have rotate 0, just so it has a stop and end point there. So let's see if that works as expected. Cool. Yeah, so we just flip that around when it's open and closed with those little helpers there. Now, that bottom border is going to be a little bit interesting here because it shows up at the top between the panel and the trigger in all situations, basically, but we can't really include it as part of the button because our focus indicator and our padding would be really odd there. So I might actually kind of show and hide two different versions of this border. When it's collapsed, I think the border is actually part of the disclosure itself on the outermost container. And then when it's open, I might actually show the border as part of the panel up top. So that way we can maintain the spacing that we're looking for. So we're going to have to bring this down to padding bottom of 16 on the disclosure, because we have to account for that extra padding of 8 pixels on the button itself. So let's go padding bottom, and 16 is 4 in our scale. I'm going to say border bottom and border gray 200. Okay, we'll notice that our padding isn't what you'd expect it to be. So we might actually have to incorporate this as a decorative element. I think that might be the best way to do this. Sometimes these things get a little tricky because you have these visual considerations, but you also have to think about the tap target. So I'm gonna create a hidden a div that's hidden from the accessibility tree, basically. And with this, we had our margin bottom 4, so I'm going to mimic that with padding, or with margin top 4, sorry. And we also need to kind of fake that left and right padding. So we have px2, but ultimately we'd want px4 visually, so we'll have to do it with some margin on the left and right. And then let's say border bottom, and I'm going to make it transparent by default, or when it's open, so we'll engage those X open and close classes as well. So when it's open, we basically want to hide this temporary border. Sorry for all the tabbing around, because we'll be showing that border as part of the disclosure panel up top. This will make more sense in a second, and hopefully this works. Otherwise, I'm just going to be rambling along with a bunch of confusing statements here. So we have X not open class. When it's not open, this is when we actually want to show it, and it'll be border gray 200. And this way, it's kind of visually hidden when we don't need it. So let's see what this looks like. We have a border. It has the left and right constraints that we're looking for. When we open it, it goes away. Okay, cool. So now when we open the panel, I want that border to be coming from inside the panel. I know this seems really roundabout, but I think it'll work. Let's see. So in the panel, let's see, we want to have border top above it, which we could do on this UL. Yeah, let's try that out. So border top, and this will be border gray 200. We're basically faking that same thing. Then we're going to need some top padding of 24. Padding top 4. And then we want some spacing between them too. So I think it's space Y4 it looked like. For these options, there should be some spacing between. Having trouble selecting in Figma right now. It's only 16 there, so that's, yeah, 4. That looks good. And then we might need some kind of padding within the panel to push it down further. So let's see. So looking at this again, it'd be 24 typically, but we're going to subtract 8 pixels for that padding on the button. So this would be PT4 there. All right, let's hope this works. Okay, a little bit closer. Looks a little tight up there. I think we needed PT6 on the UL. Yeah, that's why. Okay, PT6 there. Cool. Looking good. Okay, let's style up the typography of these options now. So we have text SM and 500, and then when it's the active element, we're going to go up to medium and grade 9. Okay, cool. So we have this differentiation between the current link and others, so let's add a condition here. This is our post HTML expressions that we're using just internally. So let's get a couple tags opened up. And if you're in React or Vue or any other front-end framework, you have conditional rendering and different ways of doing it. So it's just kind of our internal tooling way of doing that. So if this is menu option.current, which in the previous stream, we stubbed out all of our data. And so you'll see that there's a current property, a Boolean on here. So we know which link is the current one. Sorry for all the scrolling here. So if it's current, then we will want to have text SM, the medium, and gray 9. And then also for accessibility, we want to say aria current is equal to page, so that this link is the page that you're currently looking at. That's how it'll be communicated. If it's not the current link, then we just want normal weight and 500 color. So check our preview. I think I broke something. So let's see. Looks like I have, I'm missing a space and I didn't know how to parse that, it looks like. Okay, cool. We should be back in action now. Give this a refresh. And once more, clear out those errors. Cool. All right, that's looking good. Our padding is not enough. Yeah, so we have to add some padding on the panel itself. So let's add px2 inside of here to fake that 16 pixels of padding total. Okay, so now everything's lining up and we're able to open this and start moving through our links here. Cool. I think that's all for this mobile version of this. For the desktop version, we basically show just the contents of this in a sidebar. So I'm going to render this out, but we won't worry about positioning it on the page as a whole just yet, because we'll want to wait to have our product grid in place. Well, we could do it with our hero too. I think that might be fine. So let's just kind of play around with this real quick. So this whole thing that we just built, our menu, it looks like at the large breakpoint, we're going to hide all this. So LG hidden. And we're basically going to want just what we had in the panel outside of the main tag. Let's put this in an aside tag because this is complementary to the main content. And let's convert this back to just standard HTML. So we'll have nav, and then we can use our normal padding values here. We don't want any padding top. Actually, we don't even want padding at all on this. So let's just see, because it'll already inherit the grid from the larger layout that we have. Let's make sure our tags match real quick. Already labeled menu. I might rename this in both places. Oops, I minimized everything. I might rename this in both places to be, maybe categories is a better name for this navigation. So let's just say categories. And with multi-cursor, yep, have it edited in both places. So this aside is going to be hidden by default, and then LG, let's just make it block. I think that'll be fine, yeah, because we don't need flex or anything on the parent. So if we look at our breakpoints here, cool, we get all of our items rendering out, and then the menu is hidden on larger breakpoints. So while we're here, I think we'll need to incorporate some of the overarching layout for this main section. So I'm going to fold up our aside and main tags and put them inside of a div. And with this div, we will have a grid layout on a large breakpoint. So we have LG, let's think through this real quick because, yeah, we'll have a max width first. So max width of 7XL, which is the common container width that we use in Tailwind UI. We have MX Auto to keep everything centered. And then within that, what we can do is incorporate our grid. We'll also need PX8 typically at that point. So we have our grid, and then how many columns do we want? Let's go back to our design reference here. So I don't see our layout grids in this file. They might be in a different file and didn't come through, but we can do some kind of rough comparison here. It looks like it's more than 2/3. So I might go with a 12 grid column and do like 10 and 2, or 8 and 4 would be 2/3 again. So it might be like a 10 and 2 situation. Let's try that out. So grid call is 12. Let's say the gap is 8. So that'd be 32 pixels equivalent. And then for the large breakpoint, we want our aside to span 2 and our main content to span 10. So I think that'll look okay. All right, so that's looking close. And then one thing we noticed is we have some padding top on this hero section at smaller breakpoints. So at the LG breakpoint, let's get rid of that. I think that'll tuck that up to match. Somewhat. Okay, cool. So we need some padding on the parent then in that case. So we're just kind of dancing around a little bit. So padding top 64. And I might refactor some of this to kind of be inherited at lower breakpoints as well. Because, yeah, I might actually do that. Because it's just the first thing on the page, so we can incorporate that easily. All right, 64 is way too big. I meant to say 16, which becomes 64 in our spacing scale. Looking good. And then we have our border and our padding top on these left links that we copied over from our mobile layout. So let's get rid of those. So we don't need padding top, we just need the spacing. All right, that's looking pretty good. I think that looks decent. Only other thing I can think of is maybe 1/3 and 3/3 maybe is closer to what we're trying to go for here. But let's check this out at a larger breakpoint. I think this works for now. I might come back and revisit that. And let's see here. Cool. So I think that's pretty much it for these. Let me make sure the font size remains the same on desktop. Yeah, that looks good. Okay, cool. So we have our overarching responsive layout. Let's dive into the product grid, and I think that'll actually finish out this whole page. So I'm going to collapse down some things so we can focus in on this. Let's see here. I might need to access our data above, so I'm going to fold up the header as well. That way it's less scrolling distance up there. We're done with our hero. We're done with our menu. And now we can focus on the product grid. So this is a hidden heading of products because it's in a distinct section that has its own accessible name or ARIA label, basically. And this loop where we go over each of our products is what we want to work on next. So back to our design reference. Each product, we have our image, title, star rating, total reviews, and the price all contained within this card. I'm going to style the typography first, and then we can dig into some of this other UI details here. So everybody following along, let me know if you have any questions. Happy to answer those, so feel free to put those in the chat. I know I'm moving kind of quick, but just kind of showing day in the life of how I built these things out. All right, so let's see. The title itself is going to be text SM, font medium, and text gray 900. And then we're going to have normal and gray 5 on this review count. So text SM, text gray 500. And then the price, margin top 4, and it's base, medium, and 9. Okay. So text base, font medium, and text gray 900 again. Technically, I don't have to specify text base here because it's default. It should be inherited from the cascade. Sometimes I like to include it as a reassurance in case the parent has typography, a text size set on it. And also for users as well. Sometimes it's helpful just to know that it's there. All right. I want to make sure I'm not lagging at all. Let me know if it lagged at all. I saw some things spinning, but hopefully we're good still. So next up, we're going to have our kind of reviews here, and then we can also style up our image. I'm going to put the review content together in a div. Let's make sure all that's appearing as expected. Yep, that looks correct. So our images are obviously way too big. Let's go down to the extra small breakpoint just so we can start styling this up. At a parent level, we want to get our layout going. So we have max width 2XL MX Auto, PX4 SM, PX6 LG, max width 7XL. Just lots of repetition that I do day to day. Let's see. Hopefully that works. Cool. And then actually on the large, we may not want any of this because we're going to be using the parent grid for that layout. So I think here we actually would say max width none, and then PX none, PX 0 basically. But we'll get to that in just a second. Okay, so everything has left and right padding as expected. It should be constrained as needed. What's the spacing between these? So we have space Y. Yeah, I'm going to use grid on this. So on the parent, let's see here. Back that up. So on the parent, let's say grid calls 1. And the gap Y is going to be 6, or 24 pixels in other words. And let's start styling the card itself and get the image in place. So this has BG white, a 200 gray border, and shadow SM, and it's also rounded large. Okay, so for each of these, BG white, rounded LG, it's gonna have border and border gray 200 and shadow SM. We also want overflow hidden on this so we can clip off the image. Looking pretty good. Now this image, let's figure out our responsive design for this. So it's not quite square in this mock-up. It looks like it has a fixed height and then the width scales as needed. So we'll basically do kind of a centered cover background image, and it'll be a fixed height, it looks like. 335, it's not part of our spacing scale, so I might adjust this to be something within. And same with 419, also not in our spacing scale. I could check real quick to see if this is an aspect ratio. So let me pull over a calculator here. So 278 divided by 419. Yeah, it's a 2/3. It's a 2 to 3 aspect ratio, at least on the XL breakpoint. Let's check over here as well. I closed out that calculator too quickly. So we can do this with aspect ratio if needed. So 222, 335, still that same 2/3. It doesn't hold true over here. So I think up until the large breakpoint, what we're going to do is set a fixed height and allow the width to basically clip the image as needed. And then at the large breakpoint, we want to flip over to using aspect ratio with a 2 to 3 orientation, or proportion, I should say. All right, so let's get into that. So we have div around our image, and this is going to be relative because we want to absolutely position our image. We're going to want to go overflow hidden on this. Let me think. I may not need this div, so I'm going to have to kind of play around with this a little bit, but this is my first instinct here. And I may have to look up some Tailwind CSS stuff that I can't always remember with aspect ratio as well. So with this, we want a height, I think of 320. That's the closest thing on our scale to that 335 that was in the design. So that's looking good. And then for the image, I might actually be able to do this with just the image directly. So let's say width full, And then we might be able to do object center and object cover. Hopefully I can do it with just the image and not our wrapper, but let's see if this works. So I'm gonna strip this out for just a second. Leave just the image there. And I think this worked. We'll have to check at our upper breakpoints. Yeah, it's definitely working. Obviously, we're gonna flip to a 2-column grid at some point. So right now it's way too stretched out. It doesn't make any sense, but it looks like those properties are working, which is good. So let's finish out the mobile design and then we'll adjust the image for desktop in just a second here. Going back to our smaller ones, smaller breakpoints. So we have a container around our text content, which is going to have padding on it of top and bottom. Yep, cool. So on this, let's put a div around our text content. This is going to have class bg white. Padding 6. Looks good. It's going to be flex call. May not need that actually. I'm going to leave that off for now. And then it might need text center at the parent level to center everything up. Looking good. Let's get our reviews going. So we have these icons to be a visual representation of the hidden text that we have there for accessibility. So this will have MT3 on this for the 12 pixels of top padding. Looks good. And then I'm going to have MT1 on this total reviews count. What I'm going to do here is put in a div that's already a hidden true. May not need it since our icons are already hidden, so I think I'm safe wrapping this here. And what this is going to be is a flex layout for all of those star icons. So I'm trying to think of a way to do that. In our product data, we have a rating, so it'll be 1 through 5, or I guess 0 through 5 if you had a horrible product, but in our case it's 1 through 5. Let's see here. So we want to show star icons. So let me just get that in place real quick. Herocon, the type is solid, the name is star, and the class is h5 width 5. Flex shrink 0, since we're having a flex on the parent container. SVGs like to collapse down and they get all squished. So it's good to put flex shrink 0 on them. I like to put it before the explicit box sizing because it's kind of controlling the parent's layout in a way. And then I think that'll be good. I'm going to put text gray 400 as default, but obviously we want this to be dynamic. So let's just make sure we have a star icon. It looks good. What can we do from here? So I guess we can do some conditional classes based on the rating. I think that'll work. So we're going to have 5 of these icons. I'm sure you could do all of this in a loop. I'm not creative enough for that right now. I'm pretty tired today. So let's just hard code it and see if we can think of anything more elegant in the future here. So we have the product.rating, and if it's greater than 0, then we know we want this to be yellow. So let's grab that. So this is yellow 400 and gray 200. Okay, so pretty dimmed out for that other one. Let me just grab these real quick and make sure these are all gray 200. So if it's greater than 0, we want it to be text yellow 4. Otherwise, we want it to be text gray 200. And we can close that out as a conditional class. I'm going to copy this down here. Let's see if I can remember this. Yeah, there we go. Multi-cursor. Perfect. Okay. So if it's greater than 1, we want the second star, 2, 3, and 4. I think that'll work, hopefully. All right, so we have a 1-star rating. I'm doing something wrong, obviously. Product.rating greater than 0, greater than 1. Do I have to do an upper threshold? No, I shouldn't have to. Okay, let's think through this. What am I missing here? So the rating is 5. Looks good. Let's think what else we could do to test this. Curious why it's always rendering out to be just one of the 5 there. Oh, it's because we have that text gray 200 left on the tail end of these, so it's overwriting all that. So let's grab this string and get rid of those. Cool, so we're not overwriting our work there. Right, so we have 5 stars, 5 stars, 4 stars. Cool, so we know that it updates as needed. And it looks like inside of here, we want these to be flex call, item center, justify center would be what we want. And actually item center because we're in a column layout. Looking good. Okay, cool. I think that's what we want. Last piece is we actually want to link these up because it's a product listing page. So we want to be able to link these to somewhere. So for accessibility, we want to link unique text per product. If we don't link unique text, then it would just be something like view product, view product, view product if we were going through with a screen reader. So the best unique text is this heading right here. So what I'm going to do is pop in an anchor tag. We have our href from our product data. I want to put the title inside of that. Cool. So these should be linked, hopefully. Oh, it looks like we don't have an href on our product data since we didn't see any cursor. So let's go here. After the image alt on each of these, I'm going to add an href. And let's just set that to be empty anchor for now, just so we have something. Now if we check our design, yep, you can see the cursor pointer on that. So it's actually a link now. It's not a disabled link with no href URL. And another thing that we can do as a nice trick is expand this tap target to be the entirety of this card. So we want to set relative on the card itself. And then inside of this anchor link, I want to create a span. This span will be already hidden true, just for safety here. It's going to be absolute, and it's going to go inset 0. So what this will do, ideally, is extend the tap target of the link to be the outer constraints of the product card. But all we're linking is just the product title. If we threw a link around all of this content, then when you move tab focus to it in a screen reader, it would read off all of the text at once, which is not a great user experience. So ideally, yep, it looks like that worked. So you can see that as we pass over the card, we get the full anchor text here. The only caveat to this is you can't select the text, but for smaller pieces of UI, this is a decent compromise to improve accessibility and also balance kind of user expectations and tap targets and all those things. Last thing I want to do is when the card is hovered, I want to dim the image a little bit, or at least have some sort of hover indicator. So on our card here, we want group as a hook for styling within. And when the group hover happens, we want to dim the opacity of this to be 75%. So that way we just get a little bit of a shimmer, a little bit of a change on hover to make it more clear that you're hovering the entire card. All right, so that's looking pretty good there. I don't need those dev tools open. Anything else at this point? I think our grid is looking good at the small breakpoint. Let's start working on the responsive design. So we go to 2 columns on the small breakpoint. Actually, that's the MD breakpoint. Is that right? Yeah, okay, cool. 640, yep, 640, we also go there. Okay, cool. So our grid on SM, we want to go grid calls 2. That gap remains the same. What about our vertical gap? 24 as well. So what I'm going to do is instead of specifying a Y gap, let's just do it all around for simplicity. Bump this up to the SM breakpoint. Everything's looking good. It looks like we forgot to add responsive padding to our menu trigger at this breakpoint, so we need to increase that. So I'm going to go back up a little bit here. We have our disclosure. We had PX2. I'm going to bump that up to PX4. Remember that the panel and the border actually have more padding, but for the visual constraints of the trigger, we need to tuck those in a bit. So now everything lines up there. It's looking good. Next up, let's see how far this grid takes us. all the way up until large. At that point, we're going to have 3 columns, the same gap. We're going to bump that gap up on XL. And at the large breakpoint, we need to do our aspect ratio. And I think that'll finish out the page. So just a little bit more product work, and we're all set here. So that would be at the large breakpoint. We have grid calls 3. And then at XL, let's increase that X gap to 8. I think we might increase the total gap to 8. So let's double check on that. So XL 40. Yeah. And then what about the large breakpoint? 40 there as well. Okay, cool. So we'll have gap X8. On the large breakpoint, we increase the Y to 10. Let's make sure that appears as expected. So large, 3 columns, looking good. I think we forgot to clear our padding on the hero section. So that's obvious now. We want that to be, the layout basically to be taken over by the grid layout. So let's say max width none and px0 on the hero. Good. Now that lines up. Now it does look a little constrained in there, so I might go to that 1/3 and 3/3 layout that we were talking about earlier. So instead of grid calls 4, let's have our grid calls 12. Let's do 4 of them. And then the main, let's span 3 of the 4, LG and above. That's looking better. Okay, cool. I like that much better. Cool. This is all looking good. We just need to get aspect ratio working for our images now. So let's see here. Image at the LG breakpoint. What do we want to do? Width full, height auto? Or will this not work? I'm going to have to refresh on this a little bit. So the aspect width is 2 and the aspect height is 3. Hopefully this works. Okay. I have to think through this. Basically, aspect, currently we're using the padding trick to force aspect ratios for backwards compatibility with older browsers. But it has some weird side effects. So I might have to set, I can't remember if I have to set an explicit height on these or not. Maybe I'll say width auto and then height full. I can't quite remember. But let's poke around a little bit. It's looking a little better, but the padding is all kinds of wrong. Let's see here. We're gonna have to think through this. Another option is we can do aspect ratio on a container and then absolutely position this. Maybe that's what we'll do just for those larger breakpoints. So let's say LG aspect width 2 and H3. This is going to be relative. And then on the large breakpoint, what we want to do is say height is auto, the width is already full. Do we need to do some absolute positioning here? Looking better. So let's see, absolute, and we want it to be full height that we have. Sorry if you hear any dog barking in the background. Yeah, so you can see with aspect ratio, let me grab that container there. So the padding trick has some constraints to it. I'm actually going to pull up our documentation on this because I can't always recall what combination I need here. So we have a separate plugin with its own README. Yeah, it looks like we should be able to add it on the parent. I wonder if we need anything else going on there. And let's see if we can get this to work. Okay. I have to look up some other things we've done. Let's see, aspect width. Just pulling up some code on the side to see if I have any good examples. And if not, then I might have to hold on this just for now while I figure this out. Width full, that doesn't seem to have an effect. A little bit of troubleshooting. It's funny because, you know, we're 99% done with this page, but it's going to be these 2 CSS classes that get me held up here. But hopefully we're able to figure this out. If not, I might have to look into this further. I should be able to do object cover on it still, right? Let's see. Yeah, it's surprising to me that this isn't happy. Another option is to go fully absolutely position with this. So absolute, let's go LG, let's go top half. I'm going to transform this, and then we're also going to do a negative translate y of half. The width is already full, but I might need an LG and set x0. Let's see if this does it. Hey, there we go. Okay, cool. So the absolute positioning approach works. Not the cleanest. I'm going to have to look into if there's a better way to have that inherit. Looks like I am missing an image somewhere in here, so I'll have to look into that. Let's fix that up real quick. And after that, I think we're pretty much done with this page, so we can wrap this up. Let's see, 7, 8, 9. Interesting. I guess I didn't export all the images, so I'll get that fixed up. Get that 9th image in place. I'm missing, which one is it? I'm off by 1, so that small tray is the only image I'm missing. Cool, so I'll get that in place, and then we need our padding bottom to finish this out on that main content. So at our smallest breakpoint, we have 128. That seems excessive. I'm going to match it. Yeah, it should be 64.96, I believe. I think that's a little off. They must have gotten dragged at some point. 64 across the board. Okay, so yeah, 64 all around. And then our padding top, I thought it was 48 on smaller breakpoints. Yep, okay, cool. So going back here, we got to go to our parent container. That wraps both the aside and our main, and we just need padding bottom 16. That finishes that out. Everything's looking good. Let me check it at our full preview size as it displays on the website. Everything's in place as we want it. Looking good. Okay, cool. Yes, I think that wraps up this page. So I think that'll do it for the end of this stream. As I'm closing out here, let me know if you have any questions. Feel free to put those in the chat. Happy to answer anything that you want to know about this. Again, this is for the Tailwind UI e-commerce package. We're cranking out a bunch of pages and components right now as we speak, so it's coming soon. You can be notified of when it's ready if you sign up here. Other than that, I think that's pretty much a wrap. So I'm glad the stream worked out today. I'm glad we didn't have any audio issues, and thanks for sticking around. Yeah, feel free to reach out if you have any questions, and if not, then take care and have a great day. Appreciate it, everyone. Thanks so much. Bye.